Hello again. So, as some of you might know, over on the Tabletop Crafters Guild, they'll often run monthly challenges. It's usually just something along the lines of one of the people that run the page will suggest a particular theme or a phrase that can be interpreted a few different ways, and the challenge is to simply build something that fits in with that, just for a bit of fun. Anyway, I've meant to join in a few times now, but never have, and since this month's theme, which is floating terrain by the way, since that fits in nicely with an idea that I already have, this time I'm definitely going to give it a go. So this is going to be a kind of cross between a project log and a tutorial, and I'm just going to be using textures from some of my other projects, so it should also be something that you can have a go at making yourself, if you really want to. But enough of all that, let's make a start. Okay then, so all I've done here is glue one of the floor patterns from episode 7 to a piece of thick card. And the idea is to cut it out so that most of the 1-inch square is intact, but also making it look as though the edges are kind of crumbling away. It's hard to explain, but something like the example shown on screen. Anyway, here's one that I've already got cut to size, just to speed things up a bit. Right then, so if you remember, back in episode 9 I made a few stalagmites, like this one here. However, this time I've tried to make it so that it fits on the underside of the piece that I just made. You know, so that it doesn't overhang any of the edges. But before I glue it into place, I'm just going to cut off the pointed end, so that it ends up being something like 5mm or 1/4 of an inch in diameter. Then I'm just going to take a regular glue stick and glue the whole thing into place. Again, making sure that it's not overhanging any of the edges, which should result in this kind of thing that you can see here. Okay, so next I want to fill in some of the other areas with some smaller stalagmites. Well, they're more like stalactites in this build, but you know what I mean. Anyway, as I say, I made these back in episode 9, but all you really need is a piece of scrunched up scrap paper, and a scrunched up piece of the rock pattern as well. Then I'll just quickly form the scrap paper into a basic cone shape. It's a bit hard to see with my fingers in the way, but something like that. And then I'll apply some glue to the back of the rock pattern, carefully wrap that around the little cone piece, and then cut away any excess. Then I'll just press the flat end down onto the table, just to make sure that it is nice and flat, and I'll then be able to glue that into one of the spaces underneath the tile. So I'll go ahead and do that now, and kind of squash it up against the larger piece, and with any luck, it should end up looking something like this. And to speed things along again, here's one where I've done the same thing all the way around. Okay, next I'm going to take a piece of greaseproof paper, or baking paper, parchment paper, whatever you want to call it, and I'm going to stick that to the table. I'll then use the glue gun to make a roughly 1-inch circle of hot glue, and stick the end of the stalactite into the middle of that, and hold it in place until it dries. Okay, so that took slightly longer than expected, but when it has dried, it should peel straight off. And there you go, there's the first little floating piece done. Now I just need to make 2 or 3 more of them. Right then, so if you remember, on the initial sketch, the idea is to make a kind of raised passage that's fallen into ruin. So for the passage itself, I'm just going to make a couple of small boxes. It's a similar idea to the multi-level dungeons back in episode 30. So to make these, I've just hot glued 2 pieces of corrugated card to 2 pieces of regular cardboard, and as far as the sizes go, the end is a 2-inch square. The sides are 2 inches by 3.5 inches, and on top I've glued a 2x4 section of the floor pattern, which has itself been glued to some thin corrugated card, and the overhanging end has also been cut to look a bit ruinous, like the floating piece that you saw earlier. But before it was cut and glued together, 3 of the sides were covered in the basic wall pattern, whereas the side with the overhang, that was covered in some more of the rock pattern instead. And the reason for this is because I'm going to be adding some more stalactites to this side. It's the exact same process as with the floating pieces, except that, in this instance, the larger ones are also going to be squashed flat against the back wall. So I'll go ahead and do that to the second raised passage, and I'll be back when I've got that finished. Okay, so despite getting sidetracked with another project, I have managed to get everything done for this one. So here's the two passages with their broken ends. And here's all of the kind of floating pieces which I've made in a couple of different sizes. So there's 4 of those. And I've also gone ahead and printed the water texture onto some cardstock and cut that into a bit of a random shape, with a 2-inch flat on either side. But before I cut it out, I also printed the lava texture onto the back, just so that I've got a couple of different options to choose from. So if I quickly put everything into place, this is how it should look. So some kind of crumbling passage where most of the floor has fallen away, and the bits that are remaining, they're almost kind of floating in mid-air. Anyway, here's a couple of pictures from a slightly better angle, and on the whole, I think it's turned out quite nice. However, I'm not entirely happy with the hot glue bases, so I might cut those off and maybe buy some clear acrylic miniatures bases instead, but yeah, that's a job for another time. Anyway, sometime next month I think there'll be a video over on the DM's Crafts channel that kind of showcases everyone's submissions for this little challenge, so I'll link to that in all the relevant places when it goes live. But yeah, that's it for this one, so thanks for watching as always. This has been a slightly different kind of video, but like I said at the very beginning, I have been meaning to have a go at one of these guild builds for quite a while now, so it's good to finally get one done. So thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.